Taking the cue from today's topic, harnessing civil society potential. So the question is, do we have the potential which we can harness, and are we harnessing it? As a cultural scholar and a historian, my answer is, of course, affirmative, that we have a great deal of potential in the civil society, the third sector, as we call it. In fact, if I look at my own life, I'm engaged as a civil society member in my village organization, in my school alumni organization. My parents are involved to build the temples or to labor for pasture or irrigation management. And I think that applies to all of us here in this hall. We are all members of a civil society somewhere, in some way. So one of the things that we have to perhaps, this idea of the civil society as a different entity, a sector that doesn't belong to us, all of us. And there seems to be that tendency to sort of alienate the new civil society system and sometimes approach it with a great deal of fear of sort of mismanagement or embezzlement of funds or sort of competition for the same grants and so forth. And also an unconscious approach to suppress it. So what we really need to realize then, if we have to harness, is that we have already that very strong potential into which we are very deeply embedded, a potential that we are so used to. The only problem is we have not managed to bridge the gap between the traditional civil society culture we already have and the new civil society organizations and management practices that we have started to build since 2010. When you really look at how the Bhutanese society is, I think we are all familiar with how villages are run, the temples are maintained, the festivals are managed. It's all because of the power of the civil society. And how do we harness that? How do we translate that into a contemporary context is the question that we have to ask. And if we know how to bridge that effectively, I think we will have a very easy way to harness and leverage the cultural strengths that we already have. And not only that, in fact, if we look at ourselves, I'm Buddhist, most of you are Buddhist as well, civil society is one way through which people can actually genuinely practice Mahayana Buddhism. I'm pretty sure if I ask you what the main practices of Mahayana Buddhism are to you, you will immediately come up with the answer. 6 perfections, Parchindu. That sort of encapsulates the ethics of the Bodhisattvas, the practices of the Bodhisattvas as followers of Mahayana Buddhism. And if the question is, what is the first perfection? What is the first Paralutachimpa? It's Jimpa, giving either your resources for the benefit of the majority or giving your time to your community. So it's really practice of the first paramita, which is so fundamental to Mahayana Buddhism. So when you have such a culture already very strong in the society, shouldn't we take advantage of it for the greater sort of cause of nation building? So when you look at civil society from sort of a cultural angle of how we had these traditional ways of village community solidarity and practices, when we look at it from a spiritual angle of Buddhist practice, and then more importantly, I think, of socio-economic development, of how, say in my case, ever since childhood, I've heard our leaders talk about Shungda Misi Lapchika Turiwe, for the state and the people to sort of progress hand in hand. And when people are willing to come in with taking their own initiatives to solve their own local problems, shouldn't we encourage it? Shouldn't we build better conducive systems for that to grow? So I think it's really the conceptual, perceptual level of our understanding of CSO, civil society, that we need to change first to really harness the real potential. And when I talk about civil society, again, it's not just civil society organizations that we normally think of. I think we should apply the civil society range, the scope, to religious organizations like Central Monastic Body, all the temples and the religious organizations that exist in the country. and also the village-based, community-based organizations. And these three groups combined is a very powerful force, I think, for socio-economic development, for the overall process of nation building. Because I think we need to open up. And I'll go back again to the topic, harnessing or unleashing civil society. Let's not think that civil society is out there. I don't think it like that. I've actually thought a lot about this, and I think civil society is right here. In fact, here, in our heart. So if we manage to harness the civil society within our hearts, I'm pretty sure the civil society in Bhutan will flourish. And now to bring you more down to the ground, how do you have civil society in your hearts? This room is full of powerful people. You each have your own villages, communities, schools, sports group, interest groups. I think we all ought to take part in these communities. Sit on the boards of the village community organization. I'm sure you have, many of you would have your village temple renovation work going on, and there would be need for a very good secretary general or a treasurer. I think we are all capable of doing that little bit to our communities. And that's where I think real civil society in action is. So I think it's all in our hearts, and I hope, I pray that we will not lose that, but instead that will grow more and more. Thank you.